Welcome back to History of Simple Things. Today's topic comes from one of our viewers, Tara Oake's 6674. Thanks for the suggestion. You asked, what exactly is mead and where did it come from? If you've ever watched a medieval movie, read about ancient feasts, or imagined warriors raising wooden cups in celebration, you've probably come across mead. This honey-based drink has been around for thousands of years and carries a history as rich as its flavor. So what exactly goes into making mead, how does it work, and why has it stood the test of time? Stick around as we uncover the fascinating story of mead, right here on History of Simple Things. Mead's origins go back so far that no one can point to a single place or time where it was first created. The most widely accepted theory is that it was discovered accidentally. Imagine a container of water left out with some honey inside. Wild yeast from the air lands in the mixture, fermentation begins, and suddenly you have alcohol. This could have happened as far back as 7,000 to 9,000 years ago, with archaeological evidence of fermented honey drinks found in ancient China. From there, mead spread across cultures. It became deeply rooted in ancient Europe, especially among the Norse, Celts, and Anglo-Saxons. In Norse mythology, mead wasn't just a drink, it was legendary. There was even a mythical mead of poetry said to grant wisdom and inspiration. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, mead was commonly consumed at feasts and celebrations, especially before beer became more dominant. Over time, as agriculture advanced and grains became easier to cultivate, beer and wine took over, pushing mead into the background. At its core, mead is incredibly simple. It's made from just three primary ingredients: honey, water, and yeast. That's it. But like many simple things, the magic is in how those ingredients interact. Honey provides the sugar. Yeast consumes that sugar and converts it into alcohol and carbon dioxide through fermentation. Water helps dilute the honey to a level where fermentation can happen effectively. Without water, honey is too concentrated and actually resists microbial growth. What makes mead fascinating is how flexible it is. Different types of honey, like wildflower, clover, or orange blossom, can dramatically change the flavor. On top of that, many meads include added ingredients like fruits, spices, herbs, or even hops. These variations have their own names. For example, a mead with fruit is called a melomel, while one with spices might be called a metheglin. So while the base recipe is simple, the possibilities are almost endless. The process of making mead follows the same basic principles as other fermented drinks, but with its own quirks. It starts by mixing honey and water into what's called a must. This mixture is then inoculated with yeast. Once fermentation begins, the yeast starts feeding on the sugars in the honey. This phase can last anywhere from a few weeks to several months, depending on the type of mead being made. During this time, flavors begin to develop and alcohol content rises. After the initial fermentation, the mead is often aged. This is where things get interesting. Mead can be aged for months or even years, and its flavor can evolve significantly over time, sometimes becoming smoother, richer, and more complex. Unlike beer, which is usually consumed relatively fresh, mead often benefits from patience. One common misconception is that mead is always extremely strong. While it can be, that's not always the case. The alcohol content of mead can vary widely, typically ranging from about 5% to over 20% alcohol by volume. Lighter meads, sometimes called session meads, are closer in strength to beer. Stronger varieties can rival wine or even fortified wines. The final strength depends largely on how much honey is used and how long fermentation is allowed to continue. Interestingly, the sweetness of mead doesn't always correlate with its strength. A mead can be strong but dry if most of the sugar is fermented out, or sweet and relatively low in alcohol if fermentation is stopped early. Describing the taste of mead is a bit like describing wine. It depends on many factors. The type of honey, the fermentation process, added ingredients, and aging all play a role. That said, most meads carry a noticeable honey character, though it's not always sugary sweet. Some are dry and crisp, while others are rich and dessert-like. Fruited meads can taste bright and refreshing, while spiced versions may feel warm and complex. Because honey itself varies depending on the flowers bees collect nectar from, mead can capture flavors that are surprisingly nuanced, floral, earthy, citrusy, or even slightly herbal. So if mead is so versatile and ancient, why did it fall out of popularity? The answer mostly comes down to practicality. Honey has always been more expensive and harder to produce in large quantities compared to grains or grapes. As beer and wine became easier to mass-produce, they naturally became more common. But in recent years, mead has been making a comeback. Craft beverage movements around the world have sparked renewed interest in traditional and experimental drinks. Modern meaderies are now creating high-quality meads with unique flavors, blending ancient techniques with modern science. People are rediscovering mead not just for its history, but for its diversity. It doesn't fit neatly into the categories of beer, wine, or spirits. It's something entirely its own. So what exactly is mead? At its simplest, it's fermented honey and water, but in reality it's much more than that. It's a drink with deep historical roots, shaped by countless cultures over thousands of years. From ancient rituals to modern craft experiments, mead has managed to survive and evolve. And maybe that's what makes it so interesting. In a world full of highly processed and standardized drinks, mead still feels a little unpredictable, a little closer to nature. Every batch tells a slightly different story, depending on the honey, the yeast, and the hands that made it. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.